Hey, it's Matt Storms. In a previous video, I provided an overview of the top 13 mistakes of emerging technology-based companies. In this video, what I'm going to do is to go more in depth in one particular mistake, and that's mistake number 4, which is failing to file a timely 83B election. So before I get into an example of when that occurred, I thought it may make sense to elaborate a little bit on what 83B is and what happens if 83B election is not filed. So normally when stock is received that is subject to a substantial risk of forfeiture, and that phrasing is the tax speak for subject to vesting, the recipient has to take into current income the value of the stock whenever the vesting occurs. So if a portion of the stock vests at year 1, the individual has to take into current income the value of that stock that vests at year 1. For startup companies, hopefully the value of the stock increases over time. The end result of that, though, is that when these various events of vesting happen, the value of the underlying stock that vests also increases. As a result, it yields a much higher tax bill for the underlying recipient. So what the IRS and the tax code has done is effectively allowed, through an 83B election, the ability to take into current income the value of the entirety of the stock that's subject to substantial risk of forfeiture. And there's a requirement that that filing be done within 30 days following the receipt of the stock that is subject to the vesting. So let me give you an example of when that has occurred. As you might imagine, a lot of stuff is going on with startups when they're formed. Each of the founders receive their underlying stock. They have what's referred to as a restricted stock agreement. Now, in this case, each of the 4 founders filed an 83B election with the exception of one. At I think it was about the 9th or 10th month following the initial issuance, the company was going through a financing, had a term sheet, very nice pre-money valuation, things were going well. And as part of that diligence process, the investor had requested copies of the 83B elections of each of the founders. Well, lo and behold, that founder didn't actually file that 83B election. The end result is that the founder effectively no longer had the ability to file an 83B because there's a 30-day window. And absent a situation where the company and the individual were willing to accept the value each time of the vesting event, there would have been a big tax bill. The net impact, though, was the investor said, no, we're not going to buy into this. We need to figure out a way in which to get the relevant equity in the hands of that founder. Unfortunately for this company, though, the company had an additional infusion of cash, had a term sheet at a very high pre-money valuation, so the company didn't have the option of just issuing the stock again and canceling the underlying stock. They had to come up with a creative mechanism of using stock options, which was less beneficial for that founder rather than receiving stock outright. The moral of the story is file the 83B election on time. Again, it's a 30-day window, and it's important that it be filed specifically on time in order to avoid the underlying impact, as an example that I described with the company that had to go through that process. Hope that's helpful. Thanks.